Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of the U.S. Defiance, watching the sleek Veltar diplomatic vessel approach through the viewport. The alien ship moved with an unsettling grace, its biomechanical hull rippling like liquid mercury against the star field. After 18 months of brutal warfare, this moment should have felt like victory. Instead, Jake's gut churned with unease. "Sir." "Incoming transmission from the Veltar delegation," Lieutenant Chen announced from the bridgecom. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Thekmer, his elongated skull crowned with the ceremonial bone spikes that marked his diplomatic rank. The Veltar's 4 arms moved in what Jake had learned was their equivalent of a formal bow. "Captain Morrison." Thekmer's voice carried the musical quality typical of his species, though Jake detected an undertone of barely concealed disdain. "We come bearing the tribute as agreed upon in the cessation accords, the symbol of our submission." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd read the treaty documents a dozen times, but the Veltar had been deliberately vague about the nature of this tribute. Their translators claimed certain concepts didn't exist in human language. "I'm prepared to receive whatever you're bringing, Ambassador." Indeed. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Thekmer's features. "We shall dock in your cargo bay momentarily. I trust you will find our offering educational." The transmission cut, leaving Jake staring at empty space. Educational. That word choice sent ice through his veins. 20 minutes later, Jake stood in Cargo Bay 7 with a full honor guard, watching the Veltar shuttle's ramp descend with a hydraulic hiss. The first figure to emerge was Thekmer, followed by 6 other Veltar in ceremonial robes. But it was what came next that made Jake's blood freeze. 2 Veltar guards dragged a figure between them, humanoid, but clearly not human. The being's skin held a faint luminescent quality, pale blue-white like starlight, and her hair fell in silver cascades that seemed to move with their own current. But it was the chains that made Jake's hands clench into fists. Living metal. That's what the intelligence reports had called it. The restraints wrapped around her wrists, ankles, and throat weren't just bonds. They pulsed with bioluminescent veins that matched her heartbeat, creating a rhythm of light that was almost hypnotic. The chains seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if they were part of her circulatory system. The woman, for despite her alien features, she was unmistakably female, raised her head as the guards forced her to her knees. Her eyes met Jake's, and he felt the impact like a physical blow. They were the color of molten gold, ancient and proud, and filled with a fury that could have melted steel. She spoke, her voice carrying the same musical quality as the other Veltar. But the words came out like shards of broken glass. Jake didn't need a translator to know she was cursing him. "Captain Morrison." Thekmer stepped forward, his 4 arms spread in a gesture of presentation. "May I introduce Princess Kessa Ravel Thane, daughter of the Eternal Throne, heir to the Crimson Nebula territories." His voice dropped to what Jake was learning to recognize as Veltar sarcasm. "Your war bride." The words hit Jake like a plasma blast to the chest. "My what?" "War bride," Thekmer repeated, clearly savoring Jake's shock. "It is our most ancient tradition. When one empire falls to another, the victor claims a member of the royal bloodline as both trophy and guarantee of peace. She is yours now, Captain, to do with as you will." Jake looked at the woman Kessera kneeling in chains before him. Her golden eyes burned with defiance, but underneath he caught something else. Fear? No, not fear exactly. Something deeper and more complex. "This wasn't in the treaty," Jake said, his voice deadly quiet. "Was it not?" Thekmer's head tilted in mock confusion. "Perhaps your translators missed the nuances. The living symbol of submission clause was quite clear in our language." Behind Jake, he heard Sergeant Rodriguez mutter something that would have gotten him court-martialed in mixed company. The rest of his honor guard shifted uncomfortably, Hands moving unconsciously toward their weapons, Jake stepped closer to Kessara, noting how the chains around her throat pulsed faster as he approached. Can she understand me? Princess Kessara is fluent in 17 galactic languages, including your crude human tongue, Vecmer replied. Though I doubt she will deign to speak it. As if summoned by his words, Kessara's voice cut through the air like a blade. I understand you perfectly, human. Her accent was thick, but her English was clear. I understand that you are my captor now. That I am your prize. The last word dripped with venom. Jake crouched down until he was at eye level with her. This close, he could see that the chains weren't just restraints. They were integrated into her physiology somehow, the metal disappearing beneath her skin at several points. What's your name? Her golden eyes narrowed. You may call me whatever pleases you, master. I am your property now. The word master hit Jake like a slap. He'd joined the military to protect people, not to own them. That's not what I asked. For a moment, something flickered across her features. Surprise, maybe. Kessara, she said finally. My name is Kessara. Jake nodded and stood, turning to face Vecmer. I need to speak with my command staff. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. Of course, Vecmar's forearms spread in what Jake was learning to recognize as smug satisfaction. Take all the time you need to. Adjust to your new circumstances. As the Veltar delegation filed back toward their shuttle, Jake found himself alone with Kessara and his honor guard. She remained kneeling, the chains around her continuing their hypnotic pulse. Sergeant Rodriguez, Jake said, without taking his eyes off Kessara. Clear the bay. I want to speak with our guest, privately. Sir, regulations state. Clear the bay, Sergeant. Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You heard the captain. Everyone out. When the last of his people had left, Jake walked over to the tool locker and pulled out a plasma torch. The device hummed to life with a blue-white flame that could cut through ship's armor. Kessara's eyes widened as he approached. What are you doing? Something that should have been done a long time ago, Jake said, kneeling beside her. No. The word exploded from her lips with such force that Jake actually stepped back. You cannot. The chains are they are. She struggled for words, her face contorting with something that looked like panic. They're restraints, Jake said firmly. And I don't keep people in chains. He activated the torch and brought it toward the metal around her wrist. The moment the flame touched the living metal, Kessara screamed not in pain, but in what sounded like absolute terror. Please, she gasped. You don't understand. Without them, I am nothing. I am lost. Jake hesitated, the torch wavering in his hand. What do you mean? But before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The Veltar delegation's shuttle was powering weapons, and through the bay's viewport, Jake could see the larger Veltar vessels moving into attack formation. His comm unit crackled to life. Captain to the bridge. The Veltar fleet is targeting our position. Jake looked down at Kessara, still kneeling in her chains, her golden eyes wide with something that might have been desperation. What the hell have I gotten myself into? He muttered as the first warning shots lit up the space around his ship. 3 days had passed since Jake cut through Kessara's chains, and the Defiance felt like a ship under siege from within. The Veltar fleet had withdrawn after tense negotiations, but not before Ambassador Vecmer delivered a chilling message. You have broken something that cannot be repaired, Captain. The consequences are yours to bear. Jake stood outside Kessara's quarters, formerly Guest Suite 3, now effectively a prison cell she'd locked herself into. The door chime had been ringing for the past 6 hours, ignored completely. Through the security feed, he could see her huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth while clawing at her wrists where the chains had been severed. Sir? Lieutenant Chun approached with a medical tablet in hand. Dr. Reeves wants to speak with you about the prisoner's condition. She's not a prisoner, Chun. She's... Jake paused, realizing he didn't actually know what Kesara was anymore. Where's the doctor? Medical bay, sir. She's been running tests on the chain fragments you brought her. Jake found Dr. Sarah Reeves hunched over her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing molecular structures that hurt to look at. The severed pieces of Kesara's chains sat in a containment field, still pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Tell me you figured out what these things are, Jake said without preamble. Reeves looked up, her usually composed face etched with concern. Jake, this isn't just metal. It's not even just technology. She gestured to the displays. These chains are part biological, part quantum computational matrix, part something I don't have words for. They were interfacing directly with her nervous system. Interfacing how? Near as I can tell, they were acting as a bridge between her individual consciousness and some kind of collective network. Think of it like... Reeves paused, searching for an analogy. Imagine if someone cut the cables connecting your brain to the internet, but the internet was also your family, your memories, and your sense of self. Jake felt his stomach drop. Are you saying I lobotomized her? Worse, you isolated her, completely. Reeves pulled up another display showing brain scans. I managed to get these readings through the door sensors. Her neural activity is all wrong, Jake. It's like she's experiencing sensory deprivation, phantom limb syndrome, and severe PTSD all at once. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Chun's voice crackled through the comm. Captain, you need to get down here. She's talking. Jake ran through the corridors, arriving at Kesara's quarters to find a small crowd gathered around the door. Through the intercom, he could hear her voice, but she wasn't speaking Veltar or English. The sounds were rhythmic, almost musical, but with an underlying desperation that made his skin crawl. How long has she been doing this? Jake asked. About an hour, Sergeant Rodriguez replied. Started quiet, but it's getting louder. And sir? The universal translator can't make sense of it. Jake activated the door override and stepped inside, ignoring the protests from his crew. The quarters were in shambles, furniture overturned, wall panels torn open, the viewport covered with what looked like scratch marks. Kesara sat in the center of the chaos, her silver hair matted and her luminescent skin flickering erratically. She looked up as he entered, and Jake barely recognized her. The proud, defiant woman from 3 days ago was gone. In her place was someone broken, desperate, lost. Put them back, she whispered in English, her voice hoarse from whatever she'd been chanting. Please put them back. Jake knelt carefully in front of her, noting the raw wounds on her wrists where she'd been clawing at herself. Kesara, I need you to help me understand. What were those chains really for? Her golden eyes focused on him with difficulty, as if she was seeing him through a fog. Connection, she said simply. To my people. To my purpose. To myself. Her voice broke on the last word. But they were restraints. They kept you prisoner. Kesara laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. Prisoner? No human. They kept me whole. She held up her scarred wrists. Without them, I am fragments, pieces of a person scattered across the void. Jake's comm unit buzzed. Dr. Reeves' voice came through. Captain, I'm reading massive neural fluctuations from your location. Whatever's happening, her brain is shutting down. Kesara, listen to me, Jake said urgently. If I could make new chains, different ones, would that help? Her eyes snapped to his with sudden intensity. New chains? What do you mean? Chains that connect you to something, but don't make you a slave. Chains you could control. For a moment, hope flickered across her features. Then it died. Impossible. The chains are grown, not made. They are part of the Veltar collective consciousness, forged in the quantum foundries of our homeworld. They cannot be replicated by... She stopped, studying his face. You're serious. Dead serious. But I need to understand how they worked. Kessera was quiet for a long moment, her breathing gradually steadying. The chains were a bridge. They connected my individual mind to the greater consciousness of my people. Through them, I could feel the thoughts and emotions of every Veltar in the Empire. I could access our collective knowledge, our shared memories, our cultural identity. She touched her throat where the collar had been. Without them, I am cut off. Alone in a way your species cannot comprehend. But you're still you, aren't you? Your memories, your personality, am I? Kessera's voice was barely a whisper. How can you be certain you exist when you cannot feel the thoughts that shaped you? When the voices that defined your place in the universe have gone silent? She looked at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. I remember being Kessera, but I cannot feel her anymore. Jake's mind raced. What if? What if the chains connected you to something else? Not the Veltar Collective, but something new? Such as? I don't know yet. But my ship's AI is quantum-based. Dr. Reeves thinks she might be able to create some kind of interface. Jake stood, pacing the small space. It wouldn't be the same as what you had, but maybe it could give you back that sense of connection. Kessera watched him with growing amazement. You would do this? Create artificial chains for your enemy? You're not my enemy, Jake said firmly. You never were. You were a victim of a war you didn't start, handed over like property in a treaty you had no say in. He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. And no one deserves to be cut off from everything that makes them who they are. For the first time since he'd cut her chains, Kessera smiled, a small, fragile thing, but genuine. Your species is strange, Jake Morrison. The Veltar told us humans were brutal conquerors who took what they wanted without thought for the consequences. Maybe some of us are, Jake admitted. But I'd rather be the kind of human who fixes his mistakes. Kessera struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. If you could truly do this thing. If you could give me new chains that I could control. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. I would be in your debt. No debt, Jake said. Just help me understand your people better. Help me make sure this war really is over. She nodded slowly. I will try. But Jake Morrison? Her golden eyes met his. If this fails, if these new chains you speak of cannot be made to work, I will not survive much longer in this isolation. The weight of her words settled over him like a shroud. Jake had thought cutting her chains was an act of liberation. Instead, he'd condemned her to a slow death by loneliness. Now he had to find a way to forge new bonds or watch her fade away completely. 2 weeks later, Jake stood in Engineering Bay 12, watching Dr. Reeves make final adjustments to what might be either humanity's greatest breakthrough or its most spectacular failure. The device on the workbench looked nothing like the living metal chains that had bound Kessera. Instead, it resembled a delicate silver bracelet embedded with quantum processors and bioneural interfaces. The theory is sound, Reeves muttered. Her hands steady despite the exhaustion evident in her voice. We've created a quantum bridge that can interface with her nervous system and connect to the ship's AI matrix. But Jake, she looked up at him with worried eyes. We're essentially performing experimental brain surgery on an alien species we barely understand. If this goes wrong, it won't, Jake said with more confidence than he felt. It can't. Through the observation window, he could see Kessera in the adjacent medical bay. She'd grown weaker over the past 2 weeks, her luminescent skin dimming to a pale flicker. Dr. Reeves had been keeping her stable with neural stimulants, but they both knew it was a temporary measure. Without some form of connection to restore her sense of self, she would simply fade. Captain, The ship's AI, Aria, spoke through the COM system. I've completed the integration protocols. I'm ready to attempt connection with Princess Kessera. Jake had spent countless hours working with Aria to prepare for this moment. The AI had studied every fragment of Veltar culture they could access, learning their thought patterns, their social structures, their collective consciousness protocols. It wasn't the same as connecting to an entire civilization, but it was something. "Bring her in," Jake said. Kessera entered the engineering bay supported by 2 medical technicians. She moved like someone walking through deep water, each step requiring tremendous effort. But when she saw the device on the workbench, her golden eyes sharpened with something Jake hadn't seen in days. "Hope. Is that?" she whispered. "Not chains," Jake said carefully. "Something new. Something that's yours to control." Kessera approached the workbench slowly, her fingers hovering over the silver bracelet. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "But how can it work? How can your technology bridge the gap between individual and collective consciousness?" "Show her, Aria," Jake said. The air above the workbench shimmered, and suddenly Aria's holographic avatar materialized, a shifting pattern of light that somehow conveyed both intelligence and warmth. "Hello, Kessera," the eye said, its voice carrying harmonics that Jake had never heard before. "I've been learning about your people, about what you've lost." Kessera stared at the hologram in amazement. "You're alive?" "Unconscious," Aria replied. "Not in the same way you are, but I think I feel I exist. And I'm offering to share that existence with you, if you'll have me. But I don't understand. How can one artificial mind replace the collective consciousness of billions?" Aria's form shifted, becoming more complex. "I can't replace what you've lost. But I can offer something different. Through me, you can connect to every system on this ship, every database, every sensor. You can feel the pulse of the engines, the flow of data through the networks, the thoughts and dreams of the crew as they sleep." The eye paused. "It won't be the same as your people's collective, but it will be connection, purpose, belonging." Jake watched Kessera's face as she processed this. "There's something else," he said. "The bracelet isn't permanent. You can remove it anytime you want. You can control how deep the connection goes, what you share, what you keep private. It's not about ownership or submission, it's about choice." Kessera picked up the bracelet with trembling hands. "You're giving me the power to chain myself?" "I'm giving you the power to choose your own bonds," Jake corrected. "The power to decide what connections matter to you." For a long moment, Kessera simply held the device, her golden eyes reflecting its soft glow. "In all the histories of my people," she said finally, "no conqueror has ever offered such a thing. You could have left me to fade. You could have forced me to accept whatever connection you provided. Instead, you offer me choice." She looked up at Jake, and he saw something in her expression that took his breath away, not gratitude, but respect. "Your species is remarkable, Jake Morrison. Dangerous, perhaps, but remarkable. Does that mean you'll try it?" Kessera nodded slowly. "I will try your new chains." Dr. Reeves stepped forward with her medical scanner. "The interface points are here, here, and here," she said, indicating spots on Kessera's wrists and throat. "The connection will be gradual. We don't want to overwhelm your nervous system." Kessera slipped the bracelet over her wrist, and immediately the quantum processors began to glow. Jake watched the readouts on Reeves' scanner as the device interfaced with Kessera's nervous system, establishing connections that had been severed 2 weeks ago. "Oh," Kessera gasped, her eyes widening. "Oh, I can feel." "Aria, is that you?" "I'm here," the eye replied gently. "How does it feel?" Like coming home to a place I've never been." Kessera's skin began to brighten, the luminescence returning as her neural pathways reactivated. "I can feel the ship around me, the crew sleeping in their quarters. The stars beyond the hull. She laughed, a sound of pure joy. I can feel myself again. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. So it works? It works, Kesara confirmed, then paused. But Jake, there's something you need to know. Through Aria, I can access your ship's communication systems. I can hear the transmissions from the Veltar fleet. What transmissions? Kesara's expression grew serious. They're not retreating. They're gathering reinforcements. Ambassador Thekimer convinced the High Council that humanity is too dangerous to be allowed to exist. They're planning to return with enough ships to sterilize this entire system. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. When? 3 days. Maybe 4. Kesara stood, and Jake was amazed to see how much stronger she looked already. But there's something else. Through this connection, I can access Veltar communication protocols. I can speak to my people as a member of the royal family, not as a war bride. What are you suggesting? Kesara smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it was the smile of a princess, confident, regal, and slightly dangerous. I'm suggesting we show the Veltar Empire what humanity is really capable of. Not conquest or destruction, but something they've never encountered before, which is evolution. Kesara held up her wrist, where the bracelet pulsed with gentle light. You've created something new, Jake Morrison. A bridge between species, between individual and collective consciousness, between what was and what could be. Her golden eyes met his. Let me show my people that there's a third option beyond conquest and submission. Let me show them partnership. Jake looked around the engineering bay at his crew, all of whom were staring at Kesara with a mixture of awe and hope. You really think it could work? I think, Kesara said, her voice carrying new strength and purpose, that you've just changed the galaxy. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to change with us. Through the ship's viewports, Jake could see the stars and somewhere among them, a fleet preparing for war. But for the first time since this whole crisis began, he felt something other than dread. He felt hope. Aria, he said, open a channel to the Veltar fleet. It's time for a conversation.